Imagine the absolute bedrock of a country's political system, a rock-solid alliance that has stood unchallenged for 38 years, just vanishing, almost overnight. That's exactly what's happening in Australian conservative politics right now. The Liberal National Coalition is entirely dead, and the power vacuum it left behind? It's triggered an absolute political earthquake, because when a major party gets completely crushed, reduced to its lowest numbers in modern history, you don't just tweak the leadership, you call in the one guy everyone thought was permanently exiled from politics. Think about the sheer speed of this collapse. Just 17 days. That's all it took after a devastating federal election loss on May 3, 2025, for the National Party to simply walk away. They announced they wouldn't renew their formal coalition agreement with the Liberals. Nearly 4 decades of partnership literally gone in less than 3 weeks. And the fallout? Unprecedented. You suddenly have the Liberal Party stranded with just 28 seats in the House of Representatives. The official opposition is totally fragmented, and the entire conservative movement is staring down an existential crisis. But this wasn't just some polite disagreement in a boardroom. It was the result of a historic, brutal electoral wipeout. The Albanese Labour government didn't just win. They surged to a massive 94-seat majority. The coalition? They completely plummeted down to just 43 seats total. And here's the real shocker. The moment that truly broke the foundation. Peter Dutton actually lost his own seat of Dixon to Labour. He became the first federal opposition leader in modern history to be voted out of his own electorate. The ground literally fell out from under them.
Which brings us to a wildly strategic, high-stakes power play. Exactly 7 years to the day after losing his own parliamentary seat of Warringah, Tony Abbott has officially returned. He stepped into the role of federal president of the Liberal Party and immediately declared them under new management. Now, historically, this presidency is just an unpaid, quiet, behind-the-scenes organizational gig. Not anymore. Abbott is leveraging his massive public profile to aggressively rebuild the depleted grassroots membership, which shockingly has fallen below 50,000 people. He's promising an all-out, aggressive campaign to take the fight directly to the government.
And frankly, the quiet panic behind closed doors is completely justified, because while the major parties were in freefall, a massive protest vote was absolutely exploding out in the regions. Look at the Fair by-election in May 2026. A staggering 32.9% primary vote swung directly to One Nation. Fair had been a lockdown, ultra-safe Liberal electorate since 2001. But with the coalition vote collapsing and regional voters feeling deeply frustrated, populist minor parties completely hijacked the political narrative.
The political establishment didn't just lose, they were totally stunned. David Farley, an agricultural businessman running for One Nation, won the seat outright. But it gets crazier. The Liberal candidate, Risa Budkowski, completely collapsed. She failed to even make it to the final 2 candidate preferred count. That has never happened before. For the first time ever, a One Nation candidate was directly elected to the House of Representatives. Traditional conservative voters entirely rejected both the Liberal and National candidates. They proved, without a doubt, they are perfectly willing to abandon the major parties altogether. But why? What is driving this massive shift? It's not just abstract political theory. It is intense, real-world economic pain. Families in these regional communities are drowning in financial strain. Core inflation is stubbornly stuck at 3.4%, sitting uncomfortably well above the Reserve Bank's target range. When you have housing and transport costs skyrocketing like this, it creates a very real, very deep feeling among regional voters that the major parties have simply left them behind. Add to that a headline CPI sitting at 4.2%. That stubbornly high number forced the Reserve Bank into 3 consecutive interest rate hikes early in the year. Everyday household budgets aren't just stretching, they are actively snapping under the pressure. We're seeing a sharp 6.2% drop in home lending volume. Mom and dad homeowners are feeling this intense economic frustration every single time they pay their bills. And make no mistake, that financial anger is translating directly into political rebellion. Right in the absolute middle of this intense economic squeeze, the Albanese government drops a massive, highly controversial tax reform package aimed squarely at property investors. To tackle housing affordability, they're restricting negative gearing write-offs entirely, limiting them exclusively to newly built properties starting in the 2027-28 financial year. On top of that, they overhauled the capital gains tax. They scrapped the 50% discount, replacing it with an inflation index system and a 30% minimum tax on realized gains, while also hitting discretionary family trusts with a flat 30% minimum rate. Now this created the ultimate political battleground. The new opposition leader, Angus Taylor, immediately branded these toxic taxes and swore to block them entirely in the Senate.
But Taylor didn't just fight back on economics. He aggressively pivoted the entire narrative. He countered with a hardline platform focused on cutting welfare payments, specifically targeting the NDIS, job seeker, and family tax benefits for non-citizens. And he explicitly linked these welfare cuts to a massive push to curb high immigration.
But to really grasp where Taylor's hardline platform came from, we have to rewind and look at the brutal internal civil war that actually put him in charge. Just months before, Susan Ley, representing the moderate faction, became the first female leader of the Liberal Party right after their election wipeout. Her leadership lasted a mere 276 days. She tried to steer the party back toward the political center, hoping to win back those crucial metropolitan voters. But she was met with intense, aggressive pushback from a hard-right faction led by Andrew Hastie, who essentially demanded populist stances on net zero and immigration just to counter one nation.
The turning point was absolutely definitive. In a brutal February 2026 party room showdown, they ousted Lee with a 34-17 vote. It was a massive, undeniable victory for the populist right. Just days later, a completely sidelined Lee resigned from Parliament entirely. And guess what? Her resignation is exactly what triggered that disastrous, highly volatile by-election in her regional seat of Farrer that we talked about earlier. This whole chain of events sparked a bitter, existential debate over the soul of the entire conservative movement. You have moderates screaming that leaning too far into a hard-right populist platform is going to permanently alienate the centrist, city-dwelling voters they desperately need to ever win an election again. On the flip side, the hard right is doubling down, insisting that uncompromising tough stances on immigration and climate are literally the only way to protect their regional bases and stop the massive surge of these minor parties.
This massive internal fracture hasn't gone unnoticed by party elders either. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull issued a stark warning about the whole situation. He argued that diving headfirst into culture wars actually just validates those minor parties. In his exact words, mimicking one nation is counterproductive. He's practically begging the party to return to traditional conservative focuses, economic management, productivity, investment, and stay away from these highly volatile social battlegrounds. But Tony Abbott's new regime? It is pulling hard in the exact opposite direction. Factional friction is exploding behind the scenes right now over rumors that senior figures from the right-wing lobby group Advance, we're talking campaign strategists like Matthew Shahan and Steve Doyle, might be brought in to run the party's entire campaign machine. Critics inside the party are sounding massive alarms, terrified that this kind of influence will plunge them so deep into divisive culture wars that centrist voters will reject them for good. And this hard-right pivot is now colliding head-on with some very serious integrity questions. Check this out. A highly exclusive event hosted by mining billionaire Gina Rinehart recently raised $300,000 for one nation. But this wasn't some grassroots town hall meeting. It was held on a literal luxury residential cruise ship called The World, and it even featured an auction for a dinner at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump.
It's a jaw-dropping contradiction, right? You have this fierce anti-establishment messaging being directly funded by ultra-wealthy elites. And it gets even messier. The revelation that One Nation leader Pauline Hanson and newly joined MP Barnaby Joyce actually claimed over $3,000 in taxpayer-funded travel to attend this elite luxury fundraiser has drawn intense, blistering criticism. Political opponents are jumping on this, arguing it completely destroys the populist right's claim that they're the genuine, authentic voice of the struggling, everyday Australian.
So, where does this leave us? Well, forward-looking polling is incredibly volatile right now. Under standard projections, if Pauline Hanson stays at the helm and retains that 28% primary vote among protest voters, the coalition remains absolutely decimated. But if the minor party leadership were to transition to Barnaby Joyce, projections show something fascinating. A significant chunk of that conservative protest base could actually flow right back to the coalition, which leaves the Liberal Party completely trapped in an impossible dilemma. Can this new Abbott-Taylor hardline platform successfully lock down the regional base and fend off these populist threats? And even if they can, will doing so permanently destroy their chances in the metropolitan seats they absolutely need to actually form government? That tension right there is the fundamental strategic challenge defining their entire immediate future.
Because the hidden truth of all this current chaos is actually pretty simple. In modern politics, an empty seat in Parliament doesn't mean a politician has lost their influence. Sometimes it just means they are changing the machinery behind the scenes. Tony Abbott might not be sitting in the House of Representatives anymore, but make no mistake, by seizing that federal presidency, he is uncompromisingly rewiring Australian conservatism from the inside out.
And it all leads to one massive, unresolved question. If the traditional major party alliances are permanently fractured by all this economic frustration and internal warfare, who ultimately holds the balance of power in Australia's future?
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.